Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guest. I got to tell you something, people. As we plan our move, me and Joanne, as we're leaving at the end of April, I'll tell you this: it's crazy because she wants to go to all these LA places she never wanted to go. She doesn't eat fast food, she doesn't eat junk food, but she wants to go to Roscoe's and she wants to go to Pink's. So it's going to be interesting. I got to find out what other places I want to go so I can try to get some, really bad junk food. So, maybe the ghetto dogs down in the bad area or some good taco trucks. Anyway, we have a great show today. We have a very, very talented gentleman who is actually from the East Coast, living in LA, and his name is Richie Kotzen. How you doing, Richie?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So you digging this weather? I mean, being an East Coast kid at heart, I mean, how long have you been in LA?
Oh, well, more than half my life. I moved to LA when I was 20, and I'm 47, so I'm pretty adjusted.
Right. Now,
I guess you guys got some storms back there, right, recently?
What's that?
You guys had some big snowstorms back there recently, is that true?
Yeah, well, I'm still in LA. I'm moving at the end of April back east. But
I'm confused. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I
no.
thought you were back there already.
No, I'm in Burbank. I'm moving.
Oh, okay. Oh, there you go. All right.
Yeah. So, but now I was reading that your musical career started when you were 5. You started playing piano.
Well, yeah, I don't know if you'd call it much of a career then, but, I started, I was one of those kids that was always kind of dancing around trying to entertain my family, and somebody said, hey, there's a piano in the house, maybe you should give him piano lessons. So they started taking me, and, I didn't really connect with it. I liked the instrument. I didn't really like going to the lady's house, and what she was showing me was just not interesting to my little brain, but a few years later, I saw a guitar at a yard sale, and that's when I really realized that I wanted to play music, and I wanted to play the guitar.
Did it speak out to you? I mean, it's like, because you're still a young age. I mean, I know when I was a kid, I played trombone. I think because I knew there was only no trombonist in the school, and I could make the band, but I stunk. But did the guitar speak out to you? I mean, what do you think made you gravitate to the guitar at a young age?
Well, I loved music, that was my thing. I loved music, and I knew I wanted to do something, singing or something. And the guitar, I remember even the moment seeing it sitting at a yard sale, and I kind of connected it to the rock bands back then, and actually Kiss would be the one. I remember seeing footage of Kiss on some news channel, like a short clip, and Gene was breathing fire, and it looked like the coolest thing ever. And I didn't know what he was holding, a bass or a guitar or what. I just knew that looked cool, and it sounded cool, and that's what I wanted to do. So when I saw the guitar sitting at the yard sale, it all kind of clicked in my little mind. And so I begged my dad to buy the guitar. Of course, we took that guitar to a local teacher, and he let us know that it was basically unplayable. So then I had to go out and get a proper guitar to learn on.
Okay, you're cutting out a little bit. Are you far from the phone?
I'm right on it.
Okay, cool. All right. So you had to go. The guitar was unplayable.
Yeah, well, when I took it to the teacher, he let us know that he couldn't teach me on that instrument because it was just not playable. So we went to the music store and we got something that was actually much better. We got my first guitar, which was a Gibson Marauder.
Now, when you picked it up, did it feel at home? And did it feel like an extension? I mean, I know that sounds crazy, but did you sit there and just pick it up and feel it and go, man, this is going to be my livelihood?
Well, no, because I was just a kid, so I didn't really think about the notion of livelihood or anything like that. But I did know that I wanted to learn how to play it. So I did not, I didn't pick it up and suddenly magically, start playing Hendrix licks, but I certainly, when I picked it up, I didn't put it down, I'll put it that way. I just kind of kept messing with it, and over time, years, of just being really curious and wanting to learn and willing to put the time into practice, eventually I started noticing progress. And by the time I was 12, I formed a band. We would play around, local little fairs and school functions. And that's kind of when things started happening, When I started playing live is when everything started coming together.
When you were playing live and at that young age, did you feel and did people look at you differently, like this kid's really good for a 12-year-old? Because I'm sure, there's so many guitarists, but when you're out there playing live, were people taking notice of you?
Yeah, that was starting to happen. That did happen when I was young, like even, from the beginning, even in the band, because I was kind of always like a little hot dog, like a showman, I would do all kinds of tricks and kind of, get a lot of attention that way. But then when the guitar playing started to progress, it was always, oh my God, that kid's great. For 15, he's only 15, like that kind of stuff. Which then eventually got annoying to me because eventually I was 16 and I was better than the 24-year-olds back then in my area. And they were still saying he's really good for 16, and I remember that used to really piss me off.
Yeah, you're like, dude, dude, I'm better than
older, so
I'm better than the big guys.
What?
No, you're sitting there going, I'm better than the older dudes. Don't stop pigeonholing me at a certain age.
Yeah, they used to really piss me off.
Now, what kind of music were you playing at that age? What was your band playing, and what were you really into? What genre? I mean, rock and roll, but who were you playing?
Well, we had a cover band, and we had a female singer, and then we had some of the other guys in the band sang as well. So we did everything from Dio to Aretha Franklin to Toto to Rush, Kansas, a lot of progressive rock we did, and then a couple metal tunes because I was a little metalhead back then. We like top 40 stuff like Missing Persons, God, so many songs we did. Mostly top 40, but we had like a progressive rock kind of thing. Like we did YYZ from Rush and La Villa Strangiata, which was that long instrumental. So we did some interesting things.
Now, were you still taking lessons at this time, or were you really self-teaching yourself and just getting your chops from being on stage?
Yeah, once I was like 15, I was in a full-time bar band, and we played 4 nights a week in the tri-state area back then. So at that point, I didn't take lessons because I just didn't have time. And then I went back at one point and got some lessons in that era. But, once I started really playing a lot in the cover band, there just wasn't time between school and everything else. So my lessons were just, getting out and playing live and then playing with the guys in my band. The guys that were in my band were all really good musicians. So I learned from them, different aspects of things. So.
What were some of the places where you were playing? Were you playing the Galaxy or places like that?
No, we played like in Reading, in my town. There was a place called the Silo, which was really cool, a great place to play. There was a place in Baltimore called Hammerjacks we used to play. There was a place in Delaware called the Stone something or other. There was a 4-in-1 club in Delaware. There were some places in Jersey that we played. There was one place in Jersey that was a nightmare because we used to have to do like 4 sets, and we would be in for like literally 4 in the morning. And oh God, it was just brutal. There were 3 nights in a row, Friday, Saturday.
So you're playing, you're getting better. You're playing all the time. At that point, what are your aspirations? I mean, what are you looking to do? Because you're still in high school, but you're playing with the big boys in the area. You're playing with older people. What were you trying to focus on?
Well, in the beginning it was really exciting and cool, but then like within 3 years in, like by the time, not even 3 years, by the time I was 17, I remember really hating playing cover songs. Like it became a real issue. Like I hate what I'm doing. I hate being in bars. I hate playing cover tunes. I want to do my own music. And so I remember with the band, we made like a little 5-song EP, and I think maybe 2 or 3 of the songs were mine, and the other songs the bass player wrote. And we had some interest from a record label. I think it was Sony back then. And they wanted to hear more material, and we just, for whatever reason, the guys in the band, from my memory, we couldn't get any material together and get it recorded. And the other problem back then is those guys wanted to continue on playing covers because they were making a lot of money. And so they wanted to stay in the club circuit. Me, as a teenager, I hated it. I was like, everybody's drunk, doing drugs and everything else. I want out. I want to go make original music. So my mindset was either this band is going to become an exclusively all-original band, or I'm going to go do it on my own. And so that's what happened. I got a record deal when I was 18, and I took it, and I moved to San Francisco for 3 months and made my record. And then I did a couple of records for that until I moved to Los Angeles in 1990.
What made you move to Los Angeles? Just because the music scene was blowing up, or you just were tired of San Francisco, or what brought you down here?
No, I never really officially lived in San Francisco, but I spent a lot of time there. So I was going back and forth from Pennsylvania out to California. And then a label called Interscope, which back then was a brand new label, bought my contract from Shrapnel Records, and they told me I needed to be in L.A. And so that's when I moved to L.A. Once I signed with Interscope.
Now, being a signed artist and such, was it easier to you to move into L.A. and to sort of emulsify yourself into the music scene here?
Well, it was easy for me for a couple of reasons. First reason, yes, because I was signed to a major label, and the guys that signed me were kind of at the top of the food chain in the record business. I mean, I remember being in L.A. for 2 weeks. All of a sudden, I was in Malibu playing football with Bruce Springsteen at the Ivy's house. So, it was pretty interesting. I was kind of in a circle of people right away because of who signed me and that thing. And then the other thing was I was also already known as a guitar player. I had already been on the cover of Guitar World magazine, and I have already put out 3 records, so I was also known as a musician. So it wasn't like I came to LA to try and make it. I already had done 3 records, and I already was known internationally as a guitar player. So it wasn't like I just came across out of nowhere.
So when you got out here, you had 3 albums. I mean, how would you constantly create material? 3 albums is a lot of songwriting and playing. I mean, how did you keep yourself, creative?
Well, back then it was no question. It was just effortless. It's what I did. I mean, I had a little guest house that I lived in, and I'd wake up, and if I had an idea for a song, I'd work off it. And my record label was in different situations to co-write with people. And so that's what I was doing, and I was excited and inspired. So I just kept writing, and it wasn't, how do I do this? This is what I do.
So now you're in LA, you're creating, and is that just your focus? Are you still learning as a guitarist? Are you trying to branch into different areas of your music genres?
Yeah, I kind of, the whole guitar thing at that point was just, the guitar became nothing more than a tool for me to write, and I had a little piano in my place, so I would write either on the keyboard or the guitar, and I was writing and demoing songs, and that lasted for about a year until at some point I got into a bit of a disagreement with my record label as to what doing, and I remember they really kind of signed me to be this kind of hard rock, guitar player guy that sang, and I really had lost interest in doing anything that would be labeled as heavy metal or hard rock. I was writing kind of more soulful, kind of R&B-ish rock stuff, kind of similar to what I'm doing now, I guess, to a certain extent. But eventually, I said, look, I have to make a record. And so we got Danny Korchmar, who's going to produce my record, who I love. I love his work. And I was in his house in Santa Monica picking songs. He put in a budget which was really cheap for back then, really reasonable. And at the last minute, the record company said, we're not going to allow you to make this record with Danny. We do not want you making this record. We signed you to be a hard rock artist, and that's what you're going to do. And so at that point, I was 21 or 20 years old, and I literally was like, well, fuck that. I'm not going to make a record. I'm not going to do anything. Fuck it. And I demanded to be released out of my contract. You know, I was frustrated. You know, I didn't want to have somebody that didn't know me tell me what I was going to do. And so they dropped me. And so I lost my deal. And around the same time of me losing my record deal, I was approached by Bret Michaels to join Poison, which is really ironic that I would refuse to make a heavy metal hard rock record as a solo artist, but then turn around and join, you know, a pop metal band. It was kind of bizarre, but there was a whole other logic behind that for me as well. So, but that was really the first, that all happened within the first year of me living in Los Angeles.
So you were very busy. Now, what was it like joining a band like that? Because you, as you said, you know, you're a guy who's, you know, writing on his own. As you said, you're getting more soul and bluesy. You don't want to write the metal. Then you get into this. What is it like then when all of a sudden you're in a band that's very popular? I know you wrote some songs with them. And then associated with that, you go into these tours, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was interesting. You know, when I met Bret Michaels to his house, and I really liked him, and I liked a lot of what he had to say, and he clearly did research on me, and he was into what I was doing, and he basically said that, you know, you would be a member of the band, you'd be writing songs, you know, we don't want a hired gun, we want someone that's actually going to contribute to the sound of the band. And so I think that we made a really great record. I still think we made a fantastic record, and especially considering we're kind of coming from two very different worlds. But, you know, your question about what it was like, it was really kind of interesting, you know, but at the same time it felt like where I was supposed to be. You know, I mean, we were, the band was still very big when I joined the band. The year before I joined, their previous tour was in People magazine as the highest grossing rock and roll tour of the year. So they were a very, very big band at the point that I joined. And then by the time the record was finished, you know, the first single did very well. But then there was kind of a shift, and MTV really, it was really MTV that just decided that, you know, we're not going to allow bands from this era to really exist on our channel. And back then, obviously, you didn't have the internet, so without MTV, you didn't really have a way to push your new record. You could still tour, but, you know, things just kind of unraveled a little bit. And then I went on and went back to making solo records, like, immediately after that.
Now, when you went back to making solo records, when did you feel your music style was shifting a little bit to what you wanted to do? And was it hard for you to get signed saying that, you know, you seemed to know what you wanted and you're a respected musician? Was it hard for you to get a deal after that, or what happened that made you sit there and say, okay?
No, you know, interestingly enough, I had a recording contract within weeks of leaving Poison. I was signed to Geffen by a very powerful guy that was no longer in the business, but he signed me, and it was one of those big record deals that they used to throw around back in the day, and I simultaneously signed with Warner Brothers Publishing, which was another one of those big deals. And suddenly, you know, financially, I was in a whole world at that moment, and so it was kind of interesting. But the thing that was really interesting was how inside that world, so little attention was put on the actual music, and so much attention was put on stuff that really didn't matter. It really was very, very frustrating. And I remember when I got signed, I really had a clear vision on what I wanted to do with the record. And, you know, the guy was insisting that I had a producer, which I didn't want. I remember having a meeting with another famous producer, and he listened to the demo, and he said, "Wow, you know, your background vocals sound kind of gospel-y. Are you sure you really want that sound?" And I'm looking at him like, "Are you fucking kidding me? What are you, a fucking idiot? Of course I want that sound. That's why I fucking recorded it that way." So needless to say, that guy wasn't going to get near the studio with me, and he was a big-time guy. And he actually went back to my record label and said, "You know, Richie's wife is singing harmony vocals on his demos. I just want to make you aware of that." So then I get this meeting with my A&R guy, and he's saying, well, no women are going to sing on your record. I'm not dealing with women on your record. And I'm like, what? Like, every single act that I love in rock has female background singers, from Bob Seger to the friggin' Black Crowes. What are you talking about? Like, and then suddenly I realized, wow, like, the record business is kind of like run by a bunch of fucking lunatics and people that really don't know anything about music and just kind of want to swing their dick and show how powerful they are. So it was weird. But in the end, I was able to get a great record producer that I had worked with on the Poison record. Richie came in, and I insisted on working with him because I knew from the past, working with him with the Poison record, that he knew me, and he knew my style, and he knew what I wanted to do. And so in the end, I loved the record we made. And I remember we were sitting in the president of Warner Brothers publishing office, Rick Shoemaker, I think his name was. And one of the songs came on, and he stopped the record after that. It was him and my manager. And he stopped the record, and he said, this is a #1 hit, this song. He said, I hope Geffen doesn't fuck this up. And that was his quote. Sure enough, when it came time to release the record, Geffen fucked it up. They didn't promote me. They shelved the project. They printed 15,000 records and put them out, and it was just really a sad situation. But that's the record business. That's how it goes.
So how do you sit there? I mean, how do you deal with that psychologically? Because you know your product's good. Someone's telling you it's the #1 record, but you're not getting the support. I mean, it must just get frustrating. Do you just sit there and go, screw it, I'm just going to keep doing my thing, and I'm going to get my following? I mean, where do you go from there?
Well, you go to a lot of places, and a lot of dark places. I mean, the 90s was really a really horrible time for me. It was really bad because I had a shitload of fucking money in the bank, and I had made what I thought was a great record, and suddenly the rug just pulled out from under me, and no real outlet until I found another record deal. And I remember coming out of that, RCA wanted to pick me up, and so, I had a meeting with them, and, I started playing them music, and again, I was kind of leaning more towards, less of the metal rock thing, and then they lost interest. So, like, the 90s was kind of a nightmare. And I remember I was still able to, like, do gigs here and there. I was doing, like, license deals where, like, I would make a record, and then I would go and find, like, smaller companies to release the record for me, so at least I had some kind of a presence. So, like, those records were records, like, in 1998, I put a record out called What Is. Around that time, I had a record called Something to Say. There was another one called Break It All Down. So those were records where I was just kind of doing whatever I wanted and then just kind of selling them to little labels to distribute. But when the internet exploded and there was a way to put your music directly on iTunes, that's when everything changed for me, because I didn't need to have a record label, and I had an outlet to be able to get my music out there. And that's when my base started building, and that's like the early 2000s. And at that point, I was getting calls to go and do these tours, like in Europe and Brazil. So I would literally just go, grab, 2 other dudes, learn my songs and go in a van for 5 weeks and drive all over Europe and play everywhere. And that's kind of how I kind of went back to basics and built my base. And now, years later, I'm kind of doing everything in-house, and I'm playing to bigger audiences. And so I guess the thing you said to me was right. You had to kind of go back and just keep at it, and stay true to your music and just, hope for the best.
Well, before you went back to your music, you also ended up in Mr. Big for a while, right?
Yeah, I did. That was an interesting time because that was 1999. I put out a solo record called Break It All Down. I had done another little project record for Shrapnel. They wanted me to do this little blues thing because they started a blues label, so they were trying to get all their guys to do like blues records. So like I did some covers and a couple of originals on that record. So those 2 records were released in '99, and at the same time, I was in a band with Stanley Clarke, and we were signed to Sony. So we were doing our record, and we did a tour in Europe and spent like a month over there. And around that time is when Mr. Big approached me, because Paul had left and they wanted to keep doing stuff. And so I ended up teaming up with Mr. Big, and I did 2 studio records with them. Not a whole lot of touring, because back then, and I know Mr. Big tours more now, but back then, their really only market that they would tour in was Japan. So we did Japan and Southeast Asia. So we did a lot of stuff in Japan with Mr. Big, and then I think we might have done one small U.S. thing on the East Coast. I mean, no more than 5 or 6 shows. So it was an interesting thing to be in that band, because technically I was a member of the band, but the band was only really active for 2 months out of the year, you know. So it was kind of, it was cool, because, you know, we'd go in and make a record and then play, you know, maybe 20 shows at the most. And then
when you're with Mr. Big, and even when you're with Poison, when you were making a record and you were involved in it, but it wasn't your solo record, because, you know, you have your tastes. I mean, is that hard as a singer-songwriter to sit there and say, okay, it's a group project, when you're used to doing it on your own?
Yeah, you know, it's a little bit of, you have to kind of surrender, you know, it's a little give and take, and, you know, it's something like, you know, thankfully I have the luxury of having my solo career, and it's what I've always done, and that's what I do, and that's what I am. So, like, the band stuff that I've done, you know, it's like, it's a diversion for me from what I normally am doing. So what I'm in the band situation, I'm mentally prepared for it, and I'm already adjusting myself to know that, all right, well, you know, the bass player might not play the bass line that you have in mind for this song. Or then again, he might, you know, if I suggest something. You know, with the Poison thing, those guys really let me kind of walk the dog on that record, so to speak. I mean, I had a lot of creative input, tons. You know, I really had, you know, I never was frustrated in working with them, and they contributed a lot as well, obviously. You know, they have their own voice and opinion, but, you know, it was really easy. Mr. Big was a little different only because the formula for Mr. Big was different, because if somebody wrote a song in Poison, for example, everybody still split it 4 ways. So, you know, I knew that if I wrote like 4 or 5 songs on that record that were mine, had nothing to do with those guys, but I knew the minute I brought them in, you know, we were going to split everything 4 ways. So it kind of eliminated some kind of weird political tension, whereas with Mr. Big, you know, you had Eric bringing songs in, the drummer would bring in songs, I would bring in songs, so there was a little bit of a different kind of strain on the writing mechanism, at least in my opinion. It was a little more strained. But, you know, I wasn't in the band for very long, and like I said, when I was active with them, I was active maximum for 2 months out of the year. So even though when you look back and say, you know, Richie Kotzen was in Mr. Big, it's like, well, yeah, I kind of was and I kind of wasn't. I mean, I did 2 albums and 2 tours, but I probably did 4 months. It probably totaled 4 months worth of work, you know. So in my mind, it was cool and I had fun, but it's almost like I forget sometimes. Oh, yeah, I did do that. You know what I mean? And the same thing with Poison, because we're talking about something I did, you know, over 25 years ago. So obviously, in my mind, you know, I would never even think about Poison unless someone asked me about it in an interview. And I'm happy to talk about it, but it's just, from my perspective, I've got, you know, 21 solo records out there, you know, and 1 Poison record. So you do the math, you know.
Right. Now, of your solo albums, I mean, you totally, you're I'm sure how do you keep churning it out? I mean, do you sit there, I mean, like when you wake up, do you constantly write? I mean, 21 albums is a lot of albums. How do you sit there and get yourself in the mind frame, and you know what you know what your fans want, or do your fans always expect something different from you? I mean, how do you approach a new project? Because 21 albums, I mean, that's a shitload of freaking albums.
Well, yes and no. I mean, look, 21 records unto itself is a lot. But when you're talking about someone that made their first record when they were 18, and now I'm 47, you know, it's not even a record a year. So, you know, I think a lot of that's a bit of an illusion. just because of how, when I started, because I started so young. But the thing about it is the process for me, like, I don't force anything. So, I have this new record out now, Salting Earth, but the record has been done since September. And what I did this time around is once I had the record done, I basically took a hiatus from anything musical. And I had the record done back in August. And so from then on, I didn't touch the guitar. I didn't sing. I did one appearance that I can remember with Nina Betancourt, Steve Von Morello. We got to jam somewhere in L.A. But I took a break, and I did some other things. And then I said to myself, now, at some point I'm going to go back and listen to this record. If I like it, I'm going to prepare to release it. So that's obviously what I'm doing now. Obviously, I ended up liking what I did. But, it's a process that when I make a record, it's over the course of years. I have songs where I've written that are finished that I've never released. I have songs that are half written and half recorded. So really what happens, and I can use the new record, Salting Earth, as an example, is I had some ideas at some point, let's say a year ago or whatever it was, some new ideas, and I went and recorded them. So let's say I had, in the course of a couple months, 3 or 4 new ideas that I developed into songs. So if these songs, if I like them and I think, wow, these songs really represent something that I want to share, I want to make a record around them, a lot of times I go back and start listening to other things that I recorded that I never finished, and then I suddenly find the inspiration to finish them. So at the end of the day, I'll have maybe 15, 20 songs that are pretty much recorded. Then I can sit back and say, okay, well, do they fit together? Do I have a record here? Does it make sense to release a record? And then I pick the ones that I like and put it out. So it appears on the outside that it's this machine that's just churning stuff out, but it's really not. There's really a lot of time that goes by where I'm relatively inactive, waiting for something to happen to inspire me to write, and then eventually, it all comes together. But I don't have this theory. I don't believe in writer's block because, to my mind, if I'm not writing, it means I don't have anything to say. It's like I look at it like input and output. If I have stuff happening in my life and I'm getting input, eventually it's going to come out in my music. And if nothing's coming out musically, it means I got to go out and do a little more living and get some more input. So it's pretty straightforward for me.
Now, how'd you come up with the title for this latest album? And do you put a lot of process into your song titles and titles? I mean, how does an artist come up with a song title when there's so many words?
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, usually there's something that, that ties things together. Let me think here about, like a song like on the new record, like the song My Rock. It's in my mind when I wrote the song, I'm talking about somebody that's there for me. So it's pretty obvious that I'm going to call it My Rock. Usually the titles, for me, they become pretty obvious. What's not always obvious is album titles. It's kind of tricky. And this one was really tricky because a lot of times I'll just take a song that I think is a lead track and I'll name the album, after that, But this time I didn't feel that made sense. So I was trying to think of a title, and then there was a line in the opening song, and I said something about Salting Earth, and I thought, man, that's a great title for me right now, because I look at the title Salting Earth, it's kind of leaving something behind, like it's a little, she's salting Earth, you're leaving something that just kind of flavors, when you're gone years from now, I think that, an artist or a musician or someone that's creating things, you're leaving something behind. So that's kind of where that came from. And the lyric came out of the opening track. So I thought that was an appropriate title at this stage of the game.
Now, seeing that you're 47 and I'm 52, so we grew up in the time when albums, I always talk to my guests about this, about when albums were, it was an event to buy an album. It was something you held and you looked at. When you put your tracks in order, do you still think of that philosophy? Because, you always remember, oh yeah, man, Led Zeppelin two, side one's better than side two. I mean, when you put and I know it's differently now because we don't have albums, but when you put your song track together, is there a certain placement you do and a momentum you want to gain?
Sequence is important to me, yeah. And so even such that when we started letting people hear the record, I just told my publicist, make sure that you give them the sequence so they listen to it in order, because it does mean something. And so sequence is important. And this record was easy for sequence. It has to do with just how it feels, really. I mean, that's the only thing I can say when you're sequencing a record. Just, you have an instinct. And so it just feels right. And that's it. It's not a science for me,
Now, you did a video, End of Earth. Now, how did you choose that song to do the video? And actually, you might know this guy. You probably know him as a guitarist. He went to my high school. He posted it last night. Do you know Reggie Wu?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah. He posted your video last night. It was just ironic because I put who's going to be on my show this week, and a girl who went to our high school said, I think Steve Cooper's interviewing him soon. And so he posted a video. How do you choose what song will be in the video?
Well, I think it was kind of obvious for me when I listened to the record. I mean, my favorite stuff on the record, believe it or not, on this record is the more piano-driven stuff. But, I figured because I've kind of been absent for quite some time as far as new music goes, I haven't toured in a while with my solo band and all that sort of thing. I wanted to come out with something that kind of picked up where I left off on the heavier side of things. And so I thought that End of Earth was the perfect song for that because it has elements of the style of singing that I like to do, and also the guitar solo at the end, and it's kind of a long song, actually. So I thought, it's not a typical 3-minute kind of little ditty, so to speak. So we decided to make that the first single, and then being that's the first single, then that's what we did. We made a video for that. And I've got another video finished as well for another song that we'll probably put out next month. So that way there'll be a few videos out there when we get on the road.
Now, do you have a very strong hand in creating the video? I know a lot of times, people decide, the director decides what, the video is going to look like. Are you very involved with the concept, and are you a conceptual person when it comes to visualizing one of your songs?
We're so involved that I'm holding the camera. Yeah, so that video, all the shots that I'm not in, I'm filming, and all the shots I am in, my wife is filming, and so we did the concept, Julia and I did it together. That was the trickiest thing. I had the performance footage, which is kind of with that red light, and the kind of quick, kind of choppy edits, and so I had that, and I remember thinking, talk to Julia, and I'm like, we need like a secondary story to go along with this. So we had the idea, me kind of being stuck in this little box and having the voodoo doll represent that, and me kind of being tortured. And then finally, at the end, I escape. I get out of the box, and I'm up, in the mountains, in the heavens, so to speak, and I soar to the end of earth, which is basically the lyric of the song. And so this kind of sub-story tied it perfectly with the storyline of the song. And so we found a way to kind of execute it, and we did everything. We shot it all out on my land out here at the house, and then at the end we ended up going to the beach and doing the last shot. So it was a lot of fun, and I edited it on my laptop, and that's the end of it. And, hey, look, if someone wants to give me a huge budget, I'll make my own lemonade video, but, we're doing everything in-house, and I think in a weird way my base kind of likes that. They all know that, I'm producing my own records and distributing them myself, and I think that's part of the charm, of what we're doing. There's no corporate element here whatsoever. It's all done out of love and fun, and just for the fun of it.
how would you describe your fan base? Who is who likes Richie Kotzen music? Like when you sit there, if you could, build a doll of someone who likes it, what would that doll look like? What do you think when you play live? What do you see as your crowd?
Well, it's interesting because it changes continent to continent, believe it or not. Now, here in the United States, I have a lot of musicians that follow me, but then I also have a lot of general rock fans, like people that are kind of from our age group that love, the rock that we grew up on. And so I have that base. And then there's kind of, a younger demographic as well. But it really, I think in the United States, a lot of it is people that are pretty close to my age that kind of grew up on what they call real rock and roll, you know what I mean, like Led Zeppelin or that sort of thing. So that's really cool. Now, I notice when I go to places like Brazil or Argentina, I have a much younger demographic, like 20 years younger than me, which is interesting. And I think probably in countries like Brazil, my music is actually played on mainstream radio. So I'm reaching out to a whole other demographic. Whereas in the United States, you don't hear me on satellite radio, but you don't hear me on, you're not going to hear a Richie Kotzen song come up after a Bruno Mars track. So as much as I would like that just doesn't happen. So the demographic really varies. And Europe is interesting. It's kind of a hybrid of what I have in the United States and what I have in Brazil. And, and I'm naming those places because those are probably my number one markets. It's interesting on Facebook. You can go in there and see where most of the people are. And I guess the United States is where most of my fans are, and then Brazil is number two. And then after that, it just kind of spreads out in various European countries like England or Italy and stuff like that.
Now, you also, in your solo career, you opened for the Stones in Japan?
I did in 2006. That was pretty interesting.
How'd that come about? It's the Stones, it's like, did they hit you up? Were they fans of yours? That'd be pretty impressive.
I wish. No, that would be great if Keith called me and asked me. No. I knew people in their camp, though. I knew their techs and Bernard Fowler. I've known him for years. In case you guys don't know, he's been the background singer for over 20 years with them. No, the way that happened was kind of interesting. I had done a record. It was a weird record that I did for a company in Japan where I covered like these animation songs. It was something that was only released in Japan, but they wanted an English-speaking artist to reinterpret these Japanese cartoon songs. It's a really bizarre job, but they contracted me to do it, and it was kind of a challenge, and so I did it. But they were talking about, and this company actually had done a lot of my tours back when I used to tour Japan a lot in the late 90s, early 2000s. And so they put the record out, and they said, well, we need to figure out how to market you for this record. And then in the next breath, they told me, well, yeah, we got the bid for the Rolling Stones tour. And I'm like, well, if you're trying to figure out how to market this record, why don't you put me on the bill and have me open up for the Stones? Now, I was kind of joking,
right?
But they're like, sort of name, great idea. So I'm like, yeah, I said, I'm full of great ideas. So they do that, they contact the Stones people and they say, hey, we'd like this kid to open up for you. And then, so the Stones people had to go on my website and look at me and make sure I wasn't, something that they didn't want on the bill. And then they said, yeah, okay, that's fine. And so I got there, and I didn't really tell anybody until after I did it, because I still didn't think it was going to happen. But then I got there, and I knew half the guys on the crew, and they were so nice to me, and it was really great. It was really cool. We played, like, all the stadiums, like the indoor stadiums, like the Osaka Dome and the Tokyo Dome and Sapporo Dome. It was really great. I think we did, like, 5 or 6 shows.
So now you do you're prolific with your albums. You put a bunch of albums out your solo career. How did the Winery Dogs come about? And did you choose those guys because they're also very respected musicians like yourself?
No, I didn't choose anything. That kind of fell in my lap. I guess what was going on their side of the fence, they had done, Billy and Mike had a project with Derek Sherinian and Tony McAlpine. So it was the four of them, and they did a world tour, and it was kind of like a kind of shreddy, kind of progressive thing, very cool. And then I guess they hit it off and wanted to do like a more, mainstream kind of thing. And they were trying to do something, from what I was told, with John Sykes, and that never got off the ground for whatever reason. And then, out of the blue, Eddie Trunk had called me and said, "Hey, would you be interested in forming, doing a power trio project with Billy Sheehan and Mike Portnoy?" And I said, "Maybe." I said, they can call me and we can talk about it. Now, on my side of the fence, it was kind of interesting, and it's all about timing, because it could have came at the wrong time. It would have never happened. But I had just come off a long touring cycle for a record I had done called 24 Hours. We did a month and a half in Europe, and we were in South America, and all over the place. And I was kind of getting a little bit burned out. And I remember saying to one of my friends, "Man, I would love to just take a break from Richie Kotzen." And what I meant by that was all the stuff that comes with being a soloist, because I do so much myself, producing a record, writing songs, blah, blah, blah. And I just kind of blindly said, "Man, I could just use a friggin' break." And no sooner did I say that, I got that phone call. And so we got together, me and Billy and Mike, and kind of started just jamming in my studio at my old house. And then came up with a couple ideas. And it just kind of happened real mellow. So we wrote, I don't know, 4 or 5 songs together, and then I brought in 4 or 5 songs that I had previously been working on. Some of them were finished, some were in the process of being finished. And by the end of it, we ended up whipping up a pretty interesting record. And it was funny, because I really thought, all right, well, this will be a cool project. I'll do this record with these guys, and then I'll go back, do my next solo record, and that'll be the end of it. Well, this thing came out, and so many people were so interested and so excited about it and loved the music and on and on and on, and that we just thought, well, this is definitely more than just a little project. I guess we should probably go back and make another record. So after we did a long, long tour cycle, we jumped right back in, did another studio record, and did another long tour cycle. And now we're going to take a break and go back to doing some other things. I'm ready now to go back to being Richie Kotzen, and I know Billy and Mike have some. I've heard a rumor that they're doing something that I think is going to be really, really, really cool. I can't say what it is, but I think they've got something in the works that is going to blow a lot of people away. So I think it's going to be a fun year for all of us that we're not playing together. And then down the line, you never know. We'll get back together and do another record or do a tour or an EP, whatever. We'll see.
Now, with your new album, how does you go about promoting these days? I mean, because what is it like marketing an album? Is it almost like a grassroots? Is it social media? How are you going to promote Salting Earth? I know you're going on tour, and how do you choose which cities you're going to play with your tour?
Well, great questions, and I'm glad you asked them, because the last part of what you said, how do I choose where I play? This is something that comes up all the time. I don't choose any of it, and I really want people to know that, and this is true with so many bands. We don't really choose where we play. I want to play everywhere. I want to play everywhere I can, but there's so much involved, and that's when you hire an agent. I can't. That's the one thing I can't do. I can go in the studio and engineer and mix a record and all that sort of thing, but I can't book a tour. So I have an agent that just books everything, and then they tell me where I'm going to play. I can suggest things. I can say, I love playing at, the so-and-so club or this room or that room. But in the end, the agencies look at the routing and expenses and just logistics, and you trust that they make the best decisions for you. And I have a great agent that does that for me. So, I basically have so many other things that are on my mind I don't want to deal with booking myself, and I don't know how, so we let the agent do that. The other part of your question, tell me what it was again. I lost my train of thought.
How do you promote these days? It's like because it's so
Yeah.
different. It's so different than it used to be.
And and it's kind of weird. It's really, really crazy, and it drives me nuts. You sign these record deals with people, and in my mind, when I'm signing a record contract and I'm giving up a huge percentage of my income, I'm expecting the record company to promote. I'm expecting the record company. And so what always happens is they end up coming back after they take a huge piece of your income and expecting you to promote your record. Well, you got to tweet this, and you got to Instagram that, and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. You're the one that's supposed to promote this. Why don't you get me a commercial tie-in? Why don't you get me a TV spot? Why don't you run full-page ads in all the magazines? Why don't you promote the record? Since you're making more money from the record than I am. So it really kind of pisses me off. Now, this situation I'm in now, I own 100% of the record. So I can go on Twitter and let my base know that I have a record available if you're interested. And that's really about it. I can talk to folks like you who have been supportive and are interested in what I'm doing, and a lot of times this is a great way to let people know, beyond the fact that there's a record, the process and what's behind it. So, doing interviews but really in the end, the way it's structured now, playing live is the key. That's the one thing that people can't really steal, so to speak. And I hate using the word steal because, a lot of times people don't realize when they're sharing music, what goes into making the music. There are expenses there. But playing live, that's really key. And the thing about social media, once you get to a point where people are aware of you and they're interested in what you're doing, that's really the best means, is just to be active and let your base know what you're doing.
Now, playing live for you, because you have such a catalog, I know it's been over years and your musical style's changed, but how do you put a set list together? I mean, I know you're going to be sitting there and playing off your new album, and do you already have, do people expect a certain encore from you? I mean, how do you put your set list together when you have so much material? I mean, what do you do? Is it the same every night, or you change it for the audience? How do you do that?
It's really funny you ask that, because it is kind of challenging. And last time I was out with my band, we had a set that was really well put together, and we stuck with it. Prior to that, I wouldn't have set lists. For many, many years, I never had set lists. I would call tunes. And so I would be in the dressing room. We'd know, all right, well, we're going to open with, so-and-so, and that actually leads into the other song. And then from there, I would just call tunes. Then, on the last tour, I came up with a set list that really worked, and we stuck with it. This time, we will do a set list as well, but it's interesting because I'm introducing some other components. I'm bringing in songs from the past that I've never, ever, ever played live, and I'm really excited about that. And also, for the new record, we're playing 7 out of the 10 songs from the new record, which normally, when I make a new record, I might do 1 or 2 songs from the new record. This time, we're really diving in and tackling the new record. And then we're doing a lot of stuff. I'm playing way more piano on this tour. And as far as the sequence of the set list, I have an idea, but then when we got in rehearsals a few days ago, suddenly we started jamming, and so much about Dylan and Mike, who are the guys in my band. They're such great musicians and such great listeners. We can start jamming, and suddenly it evolves into something we never thought. So we have things that are now being constructed in the set list that I would have never thought about if I had not got in there in the room and messed around and played with them. So the set is still being evolved. We've got the beginning kind of written out. We're going to go back in next week and do some more playing and solidify everything. But I think it's going to be a really cool and different show for me. In the past it was just get up with the trio and just kind of wing it. And I think now there's going to be some more kind of carved out moments that I hope are going to be really effective.
Now, the tour starts, I believe, April 21st at the Canyon Club?
That's right, it does.
Now, do you like playing in your own backyard so when you can drive home after the gig?
Well, you know what's funny? I shouldn't say that, but that Canyon Club literally is in my own backyard. And it's funny because years ago, for 20 years, I lived up in the hill behind the baked potato there in Hollywood or whatever. And so it was fun because I used to do gigs there and at the baked potato, and I used to joke I have the best dressing room in the world because I'd be up at my house getting ready and literally kind of walk down the hill or have someone drive me down the hill and do the show, you know. And so now I moved out to Malibu Canyon, so I'm really, really close to the Canyon Club. So that'll be my new haunt. But yeah, it's fun, man. We're starting the tour here in California, and then we're going to go all the way across, you know, Pennsylvania, Nashville. We're going to go everywhere.
And you're playing in New Hope on May 14th.
I know. That's a great town, isn't it?
It's a great little town. In fact, I'll be moving back, and I may have to come out and see that show. It's funny because I moved back at the end of April, and I used to do stand-up comedy. I'm actually playing the Philadelphia's Comedy Club, the Helium, on May 11th and May 13th. So I may just have to make that my entertainment weekend.
Oh, that's great. That'd be cool. Well, make sure that you come up and introduce yourself so I can put a face to this conversation.
Well, you know, I want to thank you for coming on. I'm glad we got in touch. And, you know, as I said, you're very respected in the circle, and it's good you have a great fan base. And it's good that seems that you've really kept to yourself, I mean, not yourself, true to yourself, and you've actually been able to have a career where a lot of times people can't stay true to themselves, you know, and they end up being not being happy. So it seems like you're happy still playing music, you're happy touring, and what can be better than that, right?
Right on. Well, thanks, man. Thanks for talking to me, and have a safe move back.
Okay. And give all your social media info real quick.
Okay. RichieKotzen.com is my website. And then if you go on that, there's links to everything, my Twitter, my Instagram. My Twitter is Richie_Kotzen. I'm embarrassed to say I don't know off the top of my head the other. Oh, YouTube is Richie Kotzen Official. And then I don't know what I am on Instagram, but it's probably something with my name. But the links are all on my website.
Okay, great. So people, check them out. Check out Richie Kotzen. Go to richiekotzen.com. It's a great website, people. It's very cool. It's very informative. And go to my website, coopertalk.net. I have 599 episodes up there, posting all the time. You can email me, Cooper, at coopertalk.net. I'll get back to you. Twitter, at coopertalk. I tweet all the time. Also, I have 2 clients now for my new PR company. If you need someone to tweet for you or someone to do social media for you or any of that stuff, you can hit me up at coopertalk.com. And my other website, stopthesalt.com. Remember when I went through that health problem? Well, I wrote a cookbook. It's 120 low-sodium recipes. No pictures to intimidate you. No long list of ingredients. It's 120 recipes. You can buy it at Amazon.com. But buy it at stopthesalt.com because I make more money. So that's about it. So people, check out Richie Kotzen, and it's RichieKotzen.com. Check his media. Check him on YouTube. Listen to him jam. I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guest. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and I'll talk to you guys next week.